it's time to sit back and relax with your favorite drink. And listen. The United States has experienced a significant proliferation of surveillance cameras in recent years. This expansion is not limited to government and law enforcement agencies. Private entities, businesses, and individuals have also contributed to this growth. Surveillance cameras are used for various purposes, including security, traffic monitoring, and even personal home security. But the increased use of surveillance cameras has raised concerns about privacy. Many argue that the widespread use of such technology can infringe upon individuals' privacy rights. Government surveillance programs, like the controversial NSA mass data collection efforts, have come under scrutiny. Legal and ethical debates continue regarding the balance between public safety and personal privacy. But tonight's story takes this one step further. The Stalker Program by Cyber Bunny. It was a Saturday, more precisely the 10th of November, which I remember distinctly. It was the first day I felt the approaching winter cold soaring through the suburbs, and I pulled my hands back at the near-freezing metal, the mailbox. The letter had a government stamp on it, and I almost tripped over the stairs as I couldn't pull my eyes away from it until I was inside. I also remember that date because it was the first weekend we spent at home after a lengthy honeymoon, which had been no less than perfect. Hawaii. Waking up from the ocean clashing with the coast. We'd gotten matching tattoos that we would probably regret later, a small wave etched into his and my wrist. I saw it again when he removed the letter from my hand, appearing as puzzled as I was. Did you get into trouble? He joked, while nonchalantly ripping open the paper with his thumb. I was on my toes behind his shoulder, like a kid at the movies, attempting to catch a glimpse at the small font. When it said, "Congratulations," in slightly larger letters, and then, "You have been selected to take part in our exclusive program." And that's where I stopped reading, thinking it a scam or some other kind of malignant practice. Just throw it in the trash, I advised him, but his stare was still stuck on the paper, transfixed, which left me with a weird feeling. "No," he mumbled, more to himself. Faster and faster his eyes traced over the lines. "Oh, look, it's official." He pointed at the stamp, a faint blue seal that seemed familiar. Moreover, it was printed on hard, thick paper that gave it some kind of perceived integrity. Well, at this point, I was getting impatient, simply grabbing the letter from his hands and skimming over it. "Surveillance program. Only a few select citizens to participate. Please assemble at Town Hall, 12 p.m. How odd. It slipped from me, but I couldn't find anything strikingly dubious about the contents. It was true public surveillance had been announced to undergo a massive expansion this year, if one were to believe the government's promises. They wanted coverage in all public places, to cut down crime rates, track missing persons, and so on. It was nothing that interested me much, but apparently new technology was being developed that was made out to be a big deal if the specifics were ever released. It was only a testing program I hadn't heard of, but it was not rare for surveys and in-person testing to take place rather secretively until the results were ready for presentation. Well, usually we'd toss those letters and invitations, but something about it had seemed to pique my husband's interest. They're testing something new, huh? Probably technology-related. He paced around the room, an idea in his mind taking shape. Sounds interesting. It's tomorrow already. You want to go? I probed. I suppose he didn't want me to notice, but he was definitely agitated about the prospect. He'd always loved fiddling with electronics, and was up to date with that surveillance campaign. On multiple occasions he tried to enlighten me on the possibilities it could open up, but I'd forgotten most of that. It was a topic I listened to out of courtesy, not really interest. "Hey, I know it's your thing. We can check it out if you want," I tried to reassure him. "Really?" Well, his eyes lit up a bit, then he seemed bothered by something, checking the letter again. "Oh, there's a problem," he muttered. "What is it?" "Well, it's addressed to me. Only me." "Oh, no problem. I'll stay home. Wouldn't want to interfere in anything." And that was a decision I would painfully regret. Nothing had been said about the time frame or the proceedings of the project. That's why it didn't worry me when 3 hours passed with no message, and I only grew marginally impatient after 5. The most comforting of fantasies I spun in my mind. It's an official thing, I thought. Phones won't be allowed. They might have a buffet after. Or simply long waiting times. But the clock mercilessly ticked on, and when the sun had set, I was reduced to a nervous bundle, pacing from window to window in between fruitless attempts at calling his number. It was impossible to sit here and wait. I had to see for myself. Well, he'd taken the car, so I was left to traverse the distance to the town centre myself. It was luckily not far, but the nighttime and freezing cold added to my discomfort. It didn't help that a lingering feeling arose in me. At first I pushed it away, attributing it to my anxiety given the situation. But I kept turning my head to all directions, almost frantically. It was as if there was someone observing me. The sound of my footsteps seemed to multiply, coming from everywhere at once. But my mind must have only been playing a trick on me. I walked faster until I was nearly running, away from some invisible danger. Dark treetops obscured my sight on the neighborhood, and it was as if the whole world had fallen silent, except for me. I reached the town hall out of breath, but immediately felt a wave of relief rush through my body as I spotted the car. It was painted a glaring red. I hated the colour, but just for a moment, I was so glad to see it. I checked there first, attempting to make out the inside through the panes. Everything just like I remembered it, but no trace of him. Well then, I had no choice. I approached the mighty building, passing by the old architecture, and grabbed the handle with determination. I pulled, but the door wouldn't give way, adamantly pushing back at me. In disbelief, I tried again and again, to no avail. God, I felt tears welling up in my eyes. Never had I imagined myself here. Images shot through my mind. Abductions, murder cases, crime scenes. Well, I needed to calm down. There would be an explanation. Somewhere. Somewhen. Trying to take in a few deep breaths of the nightly air, I let my eyes wander. This part of town was scarcely visited, especially at night time. It was no surprise the streets remained empty. Tall lamps had been set up, making the road faintly visible. Security cameras had newly been mounted on some of them, as well as on the fence rows behind. Their bleak, shimmering eyes stared back at me. Only one stood out. I squinted so as to fix my stare on it. It was quite distant from me, but without doubt exactly lined up with my position. Somewhat unnerved by the idea of being recorded loitering around the town hall at night, I quickly moved past it, keeping it in my sight. With every step I went, it seemed to follow me. I tested it, taunted it, repeatedly changing direction, and the lens turned with a mechanical jerk wherever I went. Well, they didn't do that. They never did. It made no sense for a camera to have a motion sensor pointing to a frequented road. Nothing made any sense at all. I felt dread rising up in my body, the urgent need to leave this place fast. I ran an odd curve to move out of the camera's scope of movement. But, well, it wouldn't be as easy as that. To my horror, the black, emotionless glare of the lens rose up, far above the fence I'd thought it was attached to. Shadows were still coating it in obscurity, but soon enough it expanded in my field of view, moving towards me briskly and shakily. A man stepped out of the shadow, unmistakably a grown human that walked just the slightest bit too unnaturally, almost automatically. Instead of a head, a security camera was mounted on his neck, twitching to keep up with my movement. Well, it was faster than me. I wouldn't make it across the parking lot and back home. It was already too late to even try to escape to either side of me. I had no idea what that thing would do to me if it caught me, but I was in no mood to find out, shaken by a visceral fear. I felt my way along the facade, scurrying across the side of the building while keeping the creature in sight. It took long, coordinated strides that were faster than I could possibly run. I almost stumbled over my own feet, concrete scraping along my palms. Suddenly they fell into emptiness. I tripped sideways into a narrow gap between adjacent buildings. In the darkness, it couldn't be said whether it led anywhere, but the approaching steps sounded faster and harder, and moved me to run further into the unknown alleyway. I was squeezed in between the back side of the town hall and an apartment complex next to it. There was no light to illuminate my way, but it can't have been long until I reached a dead end. I'd gained a small lead, enough to adjust my eyes to the surroundings. My hands brushed over harsh wire mesh to my right, where I had presumed only the town hall's concrete to be. There was a small gate inset into the fence that led to a flight of stairs, further down into what must be the building's basement. I rattled the door without thinking, only to discover it was held in place by a heavy lock. It had been too tall to climb over, and besides, barbed wire was spun across its full length, which I might have seen as odd had I had time to think about it. I turned my attention away from the fence, as escape seemed to wait right in front of me. The alley ended in a head-high brick wall over which I could catch a glimpse of the next road, and even a few apartments in the distance that had light shining through their windows. If I made it there, I could call for help. The thought was what drove me to grab the ledge with both hands and cram my feet into the numerous gaps to push myself up. The task took so much of my strength that I hadn't noticed it. The footsteps behind me. God, it had caught up. Part 2. For a moment, I thought myself safe, slowly climbing upwards, until it occurred to me that something still half-human could climb too. Its limbs found creases to hold onto, and its fingers stretched right after me. Just barely I made the final step and was able to pull myself up to stand. Right next to me, it did the same. Oh, I should have just jumped at the exact moment, but I missed my chance when I staggered, trying to make out the ground below on the other side. And the thing used that moment to leap at me. Within a split second, I had to make a choice. It would follow me even if I jumped. It would follow me everywhere. I saw my leg cut through the air, hit its metal head with full force. The creature stumbled back as the camera's encasing cracked. Oh, just once more, I thought, and then I could push it off the other side and hopefully damage it enough to put it out of order. But I failed. My second kick was flung through the thin air just past its goal, and it gave the camera enough time to readjust and start its attack. I was pushed over, lucky not to fall off the wall entirely. It held me down, a human hand wrapped around my neck, and my eyes staring at an unmoving lens. It squeezed firmly enough to hold me in place, but didn't seem to hurt me. Entirely still, I felt sucked in by the black void that was there in place of its face. Its aperture narrowed. It was as if it was squinting at me. In reality, the camera was just adjusting to the darkness. My sight was coated in a painful flash that turned everything a glaring white for a matter of seconds. And slowly but surely the world returned to normal. There were sharp contrasts that stuck out. One of them was a mark on the arm right in front of me. Dark ink against his pale skin. A small wave with pronounced lines. Just recently done. It startled me, more than anything I'd seen so far. He let go of me to retreat into the darkness. I, however, stumbled back in my own confusion, not to either side but backwards through the barbed wire that cut into my skin, holding up my fall, until I landed another meter deeper on the opposite side of a locked fence. And it felt like minutes lying there in silence, with the painful sensation of thorns that dug into me. I experienced it vividly when I made my first attempts to get up, shooting through every part of my body, small trails of blood that had dried across my arms. Oh, shit, was the first thing I said to myself, into the silence, reminding me of how alone I was, and now also trapped. An obvious option would have been to wait until morning, here, in the cold, with no guarantee of anyone hearing my calls for help, even if the stores nearby opened. Well, a more appealing option was to breach the door right to my feet, leading into some part of the town hall. People might still be at work there. He might be there. What I just saw couldn't be right. It must have been an illusion of my tired mind. Nothing else made sense. I somehow convinced myself that he was there. He was all right. I only had to go in. Well, to my surprise, the door wasn't locked. They must have thought the gate would suffice in keeping unwanted visitors out. Inside, as expected, was pitch black darkness. I rummaged through my pockets for a light source, but my phone was at home, happily sitting on the kitchen counter. Oh, I must have forgotten it in my haste, and now I scolded myself for it. There was no other choice than to feel my way along the walls. They were cold and dirty. Probably just a basement, maybe an archive of some sort. But I was proven wrong when my fingers found a switch. Fluorescent lights flickered, spanning across the ceiling, and gave sight to a large storage hall. It was incredibly bleak and boring in here. As I approached the middle of the room, the sound of my steps echoed back from the walls. Big cardboard boxes were stacked up to each side of me, and that was all. Because I couldn't find a reason why not, I decided to look inside. I withdrew my head with a gasp. They contained piles of large security cameras, similar to something I'd already seen. Frantically, I opened every box within my reach, but they all held the same contents. Detached cameras, dozens and dozens, cable ends sticking out of them, ready to be assembled. What was happening here? I wouldn't find answers unless I descended further into the building, and the next door was already in sight. Taking a deep breath, I opened it, reaching a long corridor. There were plenty of rooms to either side of it, some with windows, some with light in them. I was now in danger of being spotted. Normally, I should have run up to the first sign of human activity I could see. Something was telling me I wasn't supposed to be here. So I decided to keep it down and slowly crouched along the hallway, occasionally peeking through the glass panes. They all seemed like common office rooms, with a few people sunken in their work inside, scribbling down something or working on their laptops. It seemed normal enough to give me some relief. Still, I didn't knock. I felt like a criminal. Some explaining would be due if I was found in here. I certainly wasn't ready for that. Through another door, I could hear distant chatter. I was too curious not to listen in. There might be some information on the program, on the whereabouts of the testers, anything. But I was disappointed as the two men's conversation seemed to revolve only around mundane topics, TV shows, family life, and the approaching end of their shifts. Either they were ordinary workers with no involvement in the letters, or I'd caught them at an unlucky time. I was ready to move on, when suddenly one of them was interrupted in the middle of a sentence. It was the ringing of his phone. "Uh-oh, orders from the boss," he jokingly exclaimed. From then on, I could only follow one side of the conversation and listened as the men's voices grew increasingly concerned, almost frightened. "Escaped," I could hear. And then, "There's only a couple of witnesses. We can easily gloss over it." Something was definitely wrong here. "No, we'll find him. Don't worry. Sending out a team right now." They listened to some more instructions through the phone line until the call fell silent. "Fuck, man," one of them muttered, and the other joined in. "Overtime it is again, then." I suddenly realized that they'd leave the room, forcing me to withdraw with no time to process what I'd heard. Footsteps approached faster than I could have reached an end to the corridor. I had no choice but to enter a windowless room to my side. As quietly as possible, I closed the door behind me. With a sigh of relief, I realized there was nobody in my vicinity. Voices again. An adjacent door was flung open. I crouched behind a shelf I spotted just in time, frozen in place, overseeing the entirety of the room. Luckily, everyone's back was turned to me, allowing me to observe in peace. It was no office room, though. No tables, chairs, laptops. Instead, a sort of surgical table equipped with the according instruments. I held my breath. My mind spun circles trying to make sense of the scenery. Surrounding it were three figures in sterile gowns. One seemingly the head of the operation, an elderly man with a slumped-over posture, greyed-out hair peeking out from under the white surgeon's cap. To his side were two younger assistants, giving him a hand in his tasks. What were they doing now? They removed some kind of tarp covering from that table, replacing it with a clean one. This was necessary because the sheet one of the men held and quickly rolled up was glossed over with a visible layer of blood. It was unmistakably blood. I'd be fooling myself trying to assume anything else. This would all be perfectly normal had I gotten lost in a hospital, but not here. A basement locked away underneath Town Hall, the same place I presumed my husband to be. They left the scene all at once. I stayed down and kept my shaky breaths quiet, just in case. I was right. They returned within seconds, and not alone. With swift step, a hospital bed was rolled in, carrying a lifeless woman's body. She might not have been dead, but was entirely unconscious. Her limp body was lifted up and spread out onto the tarp. I felt nausea rising up in me. I didn't want to be here. I shouldn't. But leaving now was no option. Opening the door was guaranteed to give away my presence. Looking away also didn't occur to me. It was like any horror scenario. Nothing could have torn my eyes away from the gruesome events about to unfold. The old doctor released a long sigh, as if he was about to follow through with the mundane part of his daily routine. Without wavering, he picked up a long, hefty object. An axe. Well, a surgical axe, if you could call it that. It was polished and with a thin, fan-shaped blade that was sharp enough to see the edge even from a distance. My eyes were transfixed. I believe I didn't even breathe. It was like a scene that usually cuts away just at the right moment, but this one didn't. I saw everything. It looked unreal. I mean, have you ever seen anything like this? Not on the internet, but right in front of you. First, it feels like a cartoon, unreal and harmless, but still striking enough to remember every detail. It was odd how clean and swift it happened. Barely a sound. The man looked like he didn't even have to try. The blade seemed to fall by itself, severing the head effortlessly. It was caught by his assistant, who carried it away. I followed it with my eyes. The head of the woman who seemed so alive, as if she could start talking in an instant. Well, I couldn't possibly process the fact that it was detached. It looked entirely normal for a moment. And after that initial moment, you'll realize and you might throw up all over yourself. I prevented that, luckily, because I was still painfully aware of my intrusion. They immediately tended to the cut, stopping the bleeding and attaching something I couldn't quite recognize, until the third man arrived, not carrying a head, but something close to it. A camera. I watched paralyzed as they completed her, attaching wires to nerves, engineering her artificial brain. It might have taken hours or minutes. My perception of time was entirely lost at this point. Sometime, the team stepped away from the table, observing their creation. A jolt went through the creature. They all nodded in satisfaction. It gave me the feeling this exact scene had transpired many, many times before. Well, it was finished. They seemed to be waiting for something to happen. It might have gotten up by itself, proving their success. It might have been supposed to do all kinds of things, but I saw none of that. Instead, with a single clicking motion, the camera turned from where it was lying, facing sideways, staring right across the room, directly at a pair of widened eyes that reflected in its lens. The last thing I saw in my human life was the image of a sharpened blade rushing at me, the dull eyes of a man to whom I was just another subject, as my final conscious thoughts were cut off. "Welcome to the Stalker program," said the screen that was my sole mind. "Congratulations, you have been selected." A picture of a woman appeared, unknown to me. "This is your target. Observe at all times." Blinking dots showed up in the depths of my mechanical conscience that I couldn't quite see but feel. I knew where she was. I knew I would be watching her. Forever. Okay, so before we begin, just a big shout out to all of you who showed up, listened to last night's story, one that I wrote myself, and the comments were overwhelmingly positive, so I just wanted to let you know that really meant a lot. Thank you so much for giving the story a listen, and appreciating it. I don't get as much time to sit down and write as I would like, obviously, otherwise I'd do it a lot more often, but when I do, I really put my heart and soul into it. So it was only a short one yesterday. If you haven't had a chance to listen to it, go back, because obviously it's brilliant. But thank you really, all of you who left comments. I've got a lot of stories on the go, which I'm trying to write, but with not that much success. Anyway, what am I talking about? Thanks again for this evening, coming back. This is one of my favourite genres, the kind of story I did tonight, so hope you enjoyed that one too. Well, till next time, my dear friends, very, very sweet dreams, and bye-bye. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this story today. It really means a lot to me and to the author of the story, of course. Well, if you want to know more about me, I'm pretty much everywhere on social media. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can download my music on SoundCloud. I've got a Patreon if you feel like. Throw me $1 or $2. Very much appreciated. And of course, on Reddit, I have a place where you can leave stories if you want me to read one that you've written. Well, hoping to see you all again very soon. Till then, sweet dreams, and bye-bye.